So you want to know how powerful the United States actually is. Look, take a seat, because the weight of US power is heavy. Heavy enough to turn your kneecaps into an ankle bone like a cankle if you ain't careful. People have often wondered, for years, if the rumors they've heard about the United States are based in reality. And I think I can show you that not only are the rumors legitimate, but the truth is that US power is far larger than your expectations. Man, the US is like one of those monsters that bursts out of the sea in one of those old maps and makes the voyagers in the boat shit bricks while they fighting the waves. They know the only way out of this is to bribe that monstrosity and hope it goes back to the sea where it can never be beaten, but at least everyone on the boat knows they'll be spared. That is the United States. It is kind of how every country deals with them in one way or another. In a minute, we're gonna go through the geopolitics. I'll take you through a tour of their military arsenal, get a glimpse of their economic and cultural dominance, and I'm gonna try to give you a sense of context as we go along so you can experience the full force of why even their enemies say they're the most powerful nation that has ever existed in this era and in past eras alike. I'm Doodelay, by the way, so if you like it, share it, and let's get this whole thing rolling. One of the first things to understand is what made the US military so much more colossal than the militaries of others. Topping out around $700 billion in 2018, the US spends many times more than the top 15 world spenders, over half of which are US allies themselves. Those current spending levels mostly began during World War II and pressed on during the Cold War. Thing is though that when the Berlin Wall came down and peace was largely secured, the US never pulled back its wartime military budget like the rest of the world, probably because they weren't forced to. Having never nationalized all of their industries, they didn't experience the depression that most countries suffered after the fall of socialism and communism. Peace through strength became America's guiding philosophy. After World War II, the US began marketing itself as sort of an army for hire in defense of weaker nations that could offer it more trade and geopolitical advantages than it already had. And boy, does it have a lot of them. The first and most prominent advantage is its relative isolation from 80% of the population. You gotta remember that for many thousands of years, nations across the Atlantic didn't know each other existed. The ocean is just that massive. Even with the most advanced weaponry today, warring across an ocean is nothing to trivialize. The US knows this, so to ensure even further protection, they've got naval fleets lining both their west and east coasts. They've made lasting peace with the weaker militaries at their northern and southern borders, and these factors have allowed the United States to live stably without its heartland ever being invaded. In addition to the naval fleets which guard its coastlines and the major trade routes nearby, it also has this uncanny ability to project that military power far beyond its own borders, playing a major role in stabilizing tensions in the Persian Gulf or securing trade routes in the South China Sea. For most countries, even powerhouses like China, this is impossible. These feats are aided in part because of the large number of aircraft carriers that they own, which act like mobile territories in a literal sense, allowing the US to carry more firepower on the hull of a given carrier than some nations have in their entire nation's arsenal. If that weren't enough, they've also harbored alliances across the world to such an extent that they have not only seagoing vessels and coastlines around the world, but ground bases as well. And this again allows the US to project that power sometimes right at the border of adversaries. Having this sort of access to the world through their alliances makes it very difficult to hit the US in a spot that it actually hurt them. Because not only are their forces decentralized, but so are their numerous allies, all of which share spy intel with the US on a daily basis. I mean, I could go on about their military. Their nuclear submarines patrol every sea unhampered and undetected. The size of their air force is impressive enough, but the quality of the planes. I mean, imagine if your next door neighbor had 5,000 helicopters and Lamborghinis. The US is also always at war, so not only does it have one of the largest armies due to its population, but it has more veterans and has fought in more environments than in any other military. And those alliances I spoke of earlier cover a huge swath of the globe. For instance, the US is well known to be allied with many European nations through NATO, of course, but they're also allied, albeit to a less cohesive extent, with nearly all of the countries in the Western Hemisphere through the Rio and OAS treaties, and with Australia, and New Zealand, and Japan, and South Korea. These collective defense pacts protect around 2 billion people worldwide and untold trillions of dollars in trade security. Constructing such an all-encompassing military can only be accomplished by making a lot of money. And as is plainly obvious, money rules the world. So even though we've kind of grown accustomed to the US being the richest, it helps to remember that making 18 trillion in a year is substantially more than pulling in 17. By bogarting the Native Americans in its quest to expand westward, the US reaped more resources than I doubt it ever could have imagined. Whereas some countries are flush with just oil as a natural resource, the US has several gigantic moneymakers owing to its size, geographic diversity, and technological know-how. It also has giant river systems like the Mississippi and Ohio River that allow it to move products around cheaply within its borders. Another major aspect of the US economy is its easy access to the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. Their geographic location and large coastlines allow them to trade with both sides of the globe unrestricted by the grievances of others. Largely landlocked countries like Russia, who barely have access to even a sea, understand the importance of this, as they're often forced to play nice with Turkey, who controls the Bosphorus Strait, and Russian access to the Mediterranean. Now, because the US is involved in well over a third of all trade in the Pacific and almost all in the Atlantic, it has a forceful seat in crafting trade negotiations that suit its own interests and making sure squabbles don't get in the way of making more money. Finally, it's easy to get lost in America's brutish dominance, but people who like the US don't like it for that reason. They like it because of the culture, because of the music, the movies, the games, the tech, and the innovators. Americans have been exceptionally good at exporting their sense of style, drama, and ideas to the world at large. And this has largely occurred organically through the influence of corporations, and well outside any centralized form of planning. Just by the simple nature of market capitalism, corporations have discovered ways to get non-Americans to love American products just so that they can get them to buy them. And as long as the relationship is reciprocal in that way, there really isn't anything that much wrong with it. One of the best exports of all is actually a joint export shared by the British and American empires. With each passing decade, the world looks like it's finally adopting a universal language in English. And although the British exported English in the worst way humanly possible, with the subjugation of hundreds of millions of people, in terms of establishing peace and empathy that reaches beyond borders, sharing the language is critical for seeing people as something other than distant foreigners. And English has that effect now that the British Empire has thankfully fallen apart. So hopefully that trend continues, and when the American Empire collapses in the oceans of times, as I'm sure it will, at least we'll have a few positive things to remember it by. This is Doodelay here, signing out. Till next time, share if you like it, sub if you love it. See ya.